Poso maoni wiak, waiwanan kitanan ni mua e yoski piataya posnotaman e yum MITW Podcast. A yospis piataya posnapi notaman e ne hisikimaka e yoso matnamin e hakihi.
Welcome to the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin podcast. We are your hosts, Gary Dodge
and Sheena Wapus. On this episode, we are again, as usual, joined by Vaughn Bowles, the Public Information Officer for the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin. Welcome, Vaughn.
Hi, guys.
So I would like to remind everybody that we request you send in your COVID-19 related questions to us at podcast@mitw.org. And I would also like to remind everybody that anyone over the age of 45, any essential worker, anyone who has a job that requires food handling can now make an appointment to be vaccinated. You just have to call Community Health at 715-799-5430. And also, as a final note, this is unfortunately our host Gary's last episode with us, so we're all a little bit sad to see him go, but we're wish him the best of luck in his new venture. So thank you, Gary, for everything that you've done on the podcast.
You're welcome, and I would like to thank the Menominee Tribe for allowing me the opportunity to work here for the past 2.5 years.
Alrighty, so Vaughn, I still see a lot of people, especially on social media, that are still concerned about the vaccine. They're not totally sure that they want to get the vaccine, or they're just mainly concerned about the possibility of long-term side effects, given the amount of time that the vaccine was created and approved in. So why should people trust this vaccine will not cause any side effects in the future?
So let me start out by just saying that none of the safety steps for developing the COVID vaccines were skipped, compared to any other vaccine that's been in development. What happened was, whether you like him or not, President Trump had the Department of Defense release nearly $70 million to solve the problem. Vaccine research and creation is a really expensive process. And so having the funds available kickstarted a lot of these companies in being able to make sure they could manufacture without the risk of losses to their company. So that's one thing. A lot of people came into the mix to try to solve this problem early on. And once they started looking, they sequenced the genome or the genetic information of COVID-19. And then they all looked to see what their most promising platforms were for being able to treat the virus. And the previous administration actually ordered them to recycle previous types of mechanisms or vaccine modes that they'd used previously. So no one was starting from scratch. So they were using existing technology that they knew was proven, and they had money to move on to the next step. So with those two things out of the way, the drug companies were also instructed to start manufacturing as soon as they felt they had a promising product on the market. Additionally, instead of waiting for doctors to invite patients to join a phase 3 trial, they were able to put out an open call for volunteers. And so they were able to collect a lot more volunteers a whole lot faster than they would have in previous types of drug trials and safety trials. And so in the end, the regular safety steps were all taken, but instead of running the phases all kind of in a long sequence, they did them kind of staggered like a stairwell. And so they did a lot of their distribution planning while a lot of their manufacturing was first ramping up. And so instead of saying, all right, we have the vaccine made, how are we going to distribute it? As soon as they began making it, they're like, all right, we need to solve the problem of how to get this out to the entire American people as quickly as possible. That said, all the vaccines that did have safety problems during their phase 3 trials didn't get approval. That's why we only have 3 vaccines right now in the U.S. that have the emergency use approval authorization that the CDC hands out. all of the animal trials, all the human studies that would be normally performed during a vaccine, those were all done previous. They didn't skip any steps. There's actually a really great infographic that the Department of Defense has. We could put that in our show notes to show how they shifted the manufacturing process from the standard to what they called Project Warp Speed to make sure we had vaccines a lot faster. So none of the safety steps were skipped. It's safe. If you do have an adverse condition, it's usually within, the first 48 to 72 hours. Very, very few people have long-term issues. And right now they've found, long-term, up to about a year's worth of time shows that there's maybe a 1 to 1.5, 1 to 2 individuals per million, there we go, have, any sort of issue with the vaccine. So.
Okay, so I have heard this come up a couple times this week. Does the COVID vaccine cause issues with women who are getting mammograms?
I've seen the same type of thing, and the answer is sort of yes. So a common side effect of getting the COVID vaccine or just about any type of vaccine, whether it's influenza or the HPV vaccine, is that it ramps up the immune system and the immune response. What happens with that is it causes the lymph nodes in your body. There's some in your armpits, your groins, along the chest. They start producing more white blood cells. And what happens when they start producing more white blood cells is that they swell. Well, that happens in about 16% of patients between, 18 to 64 and about 8% of patients that are over 65 where that swelling occurs. So if you have that swelling, it can give you a false positive on a mammogram saying, and it might indicate or look like that you have cancer. You don't. It's just the natural course of the immune system taking part after that vaccination. If you do get vaccinated and you do have a mammogram or are planning on having a mammogram, they recommend having it 6 to 10 weeks after your vaccination. That way the normal swelling and stuff of the nodes subsides and you won't get a false positive. Now, of course, there are people that may have cancer or may have emerging health issues and they need it. Talk to your doctor. Don't put off the preventative health care you need. But just bear in mind, you could get a false positive from it if you are getting a mammogram, 6 weeks after your vaccination.
So this is a hopeful question, but at what point in vaccination or rate of cases that we're seeing could we quote unquote go back to normal? As in not social distancing, not worrying about masks, those types of things.
Yeah, they're still looking at the herd immunity question. It's usually right around the 70 to 80% mark. And we're kind of coming up on that mark just in our micro community and stuff. We've delivered, it's about 2,500 doses right now, first doses, and about 540 second doses. And then we've had about 950 individuals that have had COVID in the community. That's a good portion of the community since there are only about 4,000 people, 4,500 people in Menominee County. That said, only about 17 to 18% of, Shawano and Oconee County have been vaccinated. So it might be a lot longer than, we hope at this point. And it kind of depends on how quickly DHS can distribute vaccines to the rest of the state and, to the rest of the country.
So who can currently be vaccinated in the community?
So currently anyone that's a Menominee tribal member or descendant or a permanent Menominee County resident, over the age of 45 can be vaccinated. Like Sheena said in the intro, any of our tribal employees or essential workers. I believe we're also looking at any of our essential county workers can also be vaccinated. Anyone that has any sort of immunocompromised situation, they can all be vaccinated at this point.
Okay, and then so what phase of distribution are we on?
We've kind of unofficially moved to our phase 2, which is great. Means we have unrestricted vaccinations for our workers and, like we said, individuals over the age of 45.
Okay, so with all this information being out, how many doses has the tribe given out?
As of Thursday, 2,516.
Okay, and then so will the tribe help surrounding tribes, counties, if we complete vaccinations for our population?
That's a really great question. And I know Dr. Schlegel and I believe Ben Warrington, our emergency management director, met with DHS and the Stockbridge-Munsee tribe this week to talk about that very thing. Nothing solid or concrete is in the works yet, but we're definitely looking at helping, the surrounding communities and surrounding tribes.
Okay, and then will the tribe be going back to 100% operation anytime soon?
So we're not sure at what point we'll be able to resume the 100% in person, occupation capacity load. IC just issued emergency order number 13, which, extended that 75% in on-site operations until the beginning of April. At this point, we're going to reevaluate how we're doing as far as our vaccine distribution, how the caseloads are going. But something that could really help move us towards that 100% reopening would be making sure that everyone gets vaccinated. We've heard that some of the younger members of our community have been refusing or denying use or participation in our vaccine implementation. And that's something, we really would like to encourage, is that even if you are young, even if you are healthy, to get vaccinated. One of the things that the data is indicating is right now that 1 in 3 individuals that contract COVID, regardless of their age, regardless of whether they're symptomatic, are going to end up with permanent lung damage. You can see the scarring to the lungs on x-rays or CT scans, and some people lose up to 60% of their lung capacity permanently. So just think about that for a minute. If you were able to run 3 miles pre-COVID and you contracted even an asymptomatic case, you might only be able to run like 1.5 miles afterwards. So we want to strongly recommend getting vaccinated. Can't stress it enough. It's so much safer than actually getting the virus, because not only can it hurt you, it can hurt the people around you. So please get vaccinated. Take everyone's health, including your own health, into consideration when you're asked whether you want to participate in that.
All right, thank you. Did you have anything else to add?
Even though we're really strongly recommending vaccination, I want to remind everyone it's not a cure-all. They're only about 95% effective, which is great, but it's not 100% effective. And so even if you've been vaccinated, for now, we'd like to also encourage you to please continue wearing a mask and social distancing, because you still can get sick and you can pass it on if you get sick. So please be cognizant of who you're around and what surroundings you're going into. And please stay healthy and stay safe when you're out there.
Waiwanan for listening to the Menominee Indian Tribe of Wisconsin podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. You can also listen to the podcast on menominee-nsn.gov under the Community tab. Keep up to date by following us on Facebook at MITW Podcast. We do weekly updates with Vaughn and welcome any community questions you may have regarding COVID-19. Please send them in to us via email at podcast@mitw.org.